Hello to another video. This time I will be reacting to two of the most well-known book purists on YouTube probably, Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs. This is the first time I'm reacting to their videos, and I gotta say what concerns book purists, I have to say those are probably the most reasonable book purists that I have yet encountered, because they are both able to also admit mistakes or faults from the books themselves, and not only from the show. They are not only attacking the show, they are more consistent, they are more sincere and honest, because they judge the show and the books most of the time by the same criteria, but only when they are mostly compared separately. Not when not compared separately, but looked separately, but when they are compared with each other, then of course they always will give the edge to the books and not the show. And now they themselves are reacting to a article which is describing 10 harsh realities of rewatching Game of Thrones. And now, without further ado, let's listen to what they have to say and let's debunk them.
Which stands for Comic Book Resources, and it's titled "The 10 Harsh Realities of Rewatching Game of Thrones." Game of Thrones used to be the most popular.
Carmine, by the way, he calls me up and he tells me about this article, and I'm like, okay, I'll go read it, and he's like, no, don't read it. I want your fresh shocked opinion about everything. I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah, just like me. I have watched this video a bit for like 10 minutes, but only had it like in the background without paying that much attention to it, but now I'm gonna react to the whole thing.
So I know nothing about this going in.
It's always better, like when I can blindside you with certain things. So
okay, yeah.
but
that's where I am.
By Angelo Delos Trinos, Game of Thrones used to be the most popular fantasy series of all time. Now it's remembered for its wasted potential, and rewatching it doesn't help. Yes, I kind of agree with that.
I disagree. I disagree with the stance itself, because it can help. It all depends on your approach. Do you just want to rewatch to feel disappointed and angry again? And do you just want to find more flaws and mistakes and don't really want to change your stance on it? Then rewatching is pointless. But if you go in with an open mind and let go of your fan theories, predictions, headcanons, and even your worldview, even if this is very hard, then you will be able to see the things differently by rewatching the entire show. Because like I've said on numerous occasions, Game of Thrones is a story that has to be rewatched multiple times in order to be fully appreciated and understood.
Excuse me, because rewatching it, the end kind of sucks, and it's a train wreck you know is going to go down, but not yet, and you're kind of enjoying the first few seasons, which I've seen multiple times. I've seen seasons 1 up to 5 multiple times. Yeah. So,
I think, there's certainly that aspect of when you're first watching it, you kind of say, okay, well, this is going someplace. That character did something weird.
Yeah, this is when you are still clinging on to the hope and the belief that this story will go down the exact same route that you wanted to go down, and you have envisioned for the story to go down and turn out what the story was always going to be about. But then the story turns out to be something completely different, and that's where you back off.
It's going to go someplace. But
it did go many places, just very uncomfortable places that many people didn't want to visit.
It doesn't. So
It's funny you say that, because as the guy said here, this could be mostly blamed on a controversial and botched final season, but arguably these problems were there since the beginning. Rewatching HBO's dark fantasy today only makes this harsh reality more obvious for all to see. Some of the stuff on this list, there's 10. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't agree with, actually.
Like some people will give examples of like Talisa as like, anything where it's not from the book, it's kind of a disaster.
Yeah, a popular book haters or a popular book purists hating point for sure.
The super fans.
Yeah. So
The super fans, the super haters for the show. Fans maybe of the books, but not of the show.
well, okay, we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to like jump in and guess what this list is before it's here. But okay, let's hear it.
Well, like I said, some of them I agree with, some of them I don't, and I think this is one of the ones I don't agree with. The series peaked at the Red Wedding. Game of Thrones has.
That was a good one. My thoughts on this are that you can compare the big events from the first 4 seasons to the big events from the last 4 seasons, and usually those events from the last 4 seasons outshine the ones from the first 4 seasons. For example, I'm of the impression that the Green Trial, Cersei's trial, the Sept explosion at the end of season 6, is the much bigger and much more well crafted and shocking and also beautiful because of the music. Better events, groundbreaking events, shocking also because there's no source material for it, and even book readers didn't necessarily see this coming, than the Red Wedding. Another example, Battle of the Bastards, is bigger and better and more epic than the Battle of Blackwater or the Battle at the Wall. And in same fashion, the Battle at Hardhome it's a no contest against the battle at the Fist of the First Man in the show, because this battle happens off screen and we don't really see it, but also in comparison to the book version. Hardhome was more epic and bigger and had more consequences by having almost like the entire tribes, there were multiple, having like almost all wildlings being wiped out by this confrontation with the White Walkers. Another example, Shireen's death is not more emotional than Ned Stark's death, I would say, because with Ned Stark, I shed more tears than with Shireen because we have spent so much more time with Ned than with Shireen. But her death is so much more unfair, so much more unshocking, also because there's no source material to spoil it. And much more harder to swallow, even if you don't shed as much tears as with Ned, as when you're not as emotionally invested because of fewer or lesser screen time with Shireen than with Ned. It's still a child being burned by her own father, and that hits harder than Ned's death. Just to name a few, of course, the Long Night battle in season 8 is a lot bigger and better than the Castle Black battle, and so on and so forth. Just to name a few.
Countless memorable moments, but one of the most infamous is season 3's Red Wedding.
I named those examples to kind of debunk those claims that are now being made that the show peaked at the Red Wedding. I would argue within the first 4 seasons, the Red Wedding is not even the most shocking, the most amazing, most groundbreaking event. At least for me personally. Even within season 3, I found Jaime's storyline, Daenerys and Jon's storyline to be a lot more fascinating and interesting than Rob's storyline. And season 4 was the best season up to this point of the first seasons, which outshined the Red Wedding with multiple examples like Joffrey's death, Tyrion's trial, Tywin's death, Shay's death, the battle at Castle Black, and so on. Yeah, let's have them continue.
Here, the heroic Starks were ruthlessly slaughtered by the traitorous Boltons and Freys. The massacre sent shockwaves across the world and was praised for its daring brutality. However, this was as good as the series would ever get. Time and time again.
Not really, because if that was true, the ratings, the viewerships for the show would have dropped or went down, but the opposite happened. Viewership rose from season to season.
And the series tried in vain to top the Red Wedding with an even bigger display of violence, as in the Great Sept Explosion. The Red Wedding's success trapped the series in a loop, as it was stuck trying desperately to recreate the moment that cemented Game of Thrones' unforgiving.
The Belt, Season 8, Episode 5 was the biggest and most shocking event I've ever seen, and also the most shocking events within Game of Thrones as a whole. It's like Red Wedding times 100.
Reputation instead of pushing the series forward. I kind of disagree with this.
Yeah, I disagree that it was the Red Wedding. First of all, I think that Game of Thrones peak is season 1. I mean,
at least they are honest book purists. This is like the most purist talking point that can exist. By claiming only the first season was a phenomenal, amazing adaptation and the other seasons were lacking going forward. And this is where Game of Thrones peaked. At least they are honest, Unlike all those other haters who are just like NPCs clinging to the same talking point, to the same narrative. Only the first 4 seasons of Thrones were watchable and good, and after that it went downhill. No, they are at least honest that not even seasons 2 through 4 were really good adaptations. It was only the first season.
Wait a minute.
No, I mean seasons 2 and 3 are great. I have no like general problem with seasons 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. But let's be honest,
season 2 is already so much different than book 2. Like, I read the books, I watched the show, and I noticed that at least 60, or is it already with season 2? Yeah, I would say so. That 60% of the scenes, not the storylines, but the scenes themselves, 60% of them in season 2 are show original and not from the books. Or the scene is taken from the books, but altered and changed so much that it can be counted as its own show original scene. For example, Tyrion sending away Janos Slynt. The dialogue has changed, the circumstances are kinda different in the show compared to the books. It's still the same end result, but the scene is a lot different. Just like the Red Wedding. It's the same event, it's almost a one-to-one copy, it's the same outcome in the show as in the books, but it's also very different circumstances, with Talissa being there, with her being slaughtered with her child, with Catelyn killing another family member from Wall of Frey in the show, from the Blackfish being there and then running away, and all this stuff.
Not better than season 1.
No, season 1 I think is the gold standard for any book to show or movie adaptation ever.
Yeah, I mean you just can't beat it. Not that the Red Wedding it was a great moment, but it didn't. Everything else not comparing to the Red Wedding is not the Red Wedding's fault. It's the fact that like you're past book material, and so nothing's going to shock.
The belts shocked the people way more than the Red Wedding. People were able to make their peace with the Red Wedding eventually because they could have been talked down and being counseled by book readers. Oh, this all makes sense because it's the same in the books. Don't worry, the story still continues. It's still great. There are more things to come. Yeah, the late seasons of Thrones without source material don't have that luxury to be defended by book readers and being able to be counseled by them.
Like, they didn't feel like any of the characters could be killed, so they all had plot armor. Mm-hmm. Like if there was some shocking moment in the middle of season 5 where Jaime or Arya, just dies, we'd all be, pretty.
Or like the end of season 5 where Stannis died, where Shireen died, where Selyse died, where Hista Zoloric was just killed out of nowhere, Meryn Trant died, Miranda died, Ramsay's girlfriend, and Myrcella Baratheon, Jaime's daughter, died. And not to forget, Jon fucking Snow died.
Blindside, but that never happened.
See, I don't know. I think season 5 is when Game of Thrones really peaked because, and I understand a lot of people like to give season 5 a lot of flack because.
And this is where I appreciate Carmine's Red Team Reviews honesty, that he's another way to talk against this popular hater talking point that only the first 4 seasons were done well. He also includes season 5 within this frame, which I really appreciate.
The sand snakes and, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. But that aside, there's a lot of Game of Thrones
because the sand snakes make all of season 5.
Moments, a lot of memories.
Not Hardhome, not Dasnak's pit, not Jon Snow's death, not Stannis' battle against the Boltons. No. The heart and core of season 5 were the sand snakes.
Moments in season 5 that people just keep forgetting happened, like the Night's Watch betrayal of Jon Snow, Cersei's walk of shame, Shireen's burning is one of those insane things. Stannis' last stand for me, the hard home episode, kill the boy and let the man be born. There's a lot of really great moments that for some reason
totally agreed.
People keep forgetting happened in season 5, and all they remember is bad pussy, bad pussy, bad pussy.
Yeah, it's also a hypocritical criticism because George is just using the same cringe lines, like My Wish Swamp, Fat Pink Mast, or Her Cunt Became the Word. But somehow George is allowed to write this, but not Dave and Dan, not the show. But the books are. That's hypocrisy. That's when your criticism gets exposed and doesn't have any merit or weight to it. Because you are condemning the show for it, but you give the books a pass for doing the same thing.
Well, right. I still think the first 3 seasons are really great, and season 4 is pretty good. Mm-hmm. I still believe that. But I do think the plot armor was a problem. Just think about Jon dying in the show and how everyone, no one thought he was dead.
Yeah, but that was because of the book readers telling everyone online that Jon Snow would come back eventually. Because of the dreams and prophecies of the Blue Rose at the wall, because Jon was gonna walk into Ghost before he died. This is all book readers doing. Convincing everyone who has not read the books, which is the majority of the viewers, that Jon Snow is either not dead at all, or that he may be dead, but he will come back. This is cognitive dissonance by Preston Jacobs right here. This is your responsibility. This is your doing. And then you complain about it. Not him personally, but other book readers and purists like him.
No one. Everybody's just like, well, he's not dead.
To be fair, because we read the books, we look at it from a book reader perspective, but I know a lot of fans.
Again, I'm really impressed by Red Team Review by Carmine at this point, because he is admitting it. He's making admissions that are true. He's acknowledging, yeah, but look, Preston, this was our fault, because we told everyone about it that Jon would come back, because we shared our book reader's point of view on things online.
Who did not read the books thought he was truly gone.
All right. This was a debate among even book fans for a long time, whether Jon was truly gone.
He could still be gone. You don't know. George could pull a fast one.
No, I mean, if he ever writes anymore, but I would like, I think it might be a better story if Jon is gone, or at least.
Just to let you know, because of Preston's comment, if George was ever gonna write anything anymore, this video is already 3 years old. So this is from 2023 or something. And now we are 3 years later and there's still no sign of any book.
It's never a point of view character again. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose
that's a good one.
There has to be people out there. There has to be people out there that believe that Jon died in that finale. But I just saw so much stuff that's just like, no, Jon's not dead, and that's because the show made Jon into more of the protagonist than the book does.
The bathroom sign?
Not really. They made him more heroic, more of an hero than the books did. But he's still as much of a big character in the show as he is in the books. Because by the point of A Dance with Dragons to book 5, he has among the most chapters. Just like Daenerys and Tyrion, the other two biggest characters of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotta
and
have
also
it.
just cover art. You open up the DVDs and it's John on one side and Danny on the other, and how that's portrayed.
Yeah, because Jon and Daenerys are the core and the heart of the story.
It was not presented as an ensemble. It's presented as like a John and Danny story, right?
Yeah, with all these other important characters right next to them, just like in the books.
110%. And you brought up a very great point for the books. And if when you do your, John chapter or whoever is over there on the wall, even if he does get resurrected, he's no longer a point of view character because he died. I like that. I like that little thing. That's gone.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people.
I don't see Jon not being a point of view character going forward in the books. Because it's just so much, and especially from like battles point of view, we need these point of views from Jon, just like in the show. However, a character I can see not becoming another POV character once he has become the Three-Eyed Raven is Bran. So we will probably have, if there was ever going to be a 6th book, still Bran chapters, and by the end of book 6 he will have become the Three-Eyed Raven, and then book 7 we won't have any more point of view chapters from him, because then he has all the knowledge, he has all the input. He knows the entire story, he knows what he has to do and what has to happen in order to prevent a long night from happening, and in order to become king at the end. So it would be counterproductive to have chapters from his point of view going forward in the final book. That I can see, but not Jon not becoming a POV character anymore.
Think that might be the case just because fitting all of the point of view chapters into the Winds of Winter is really, really difficult.
It's just like about 20 POV characters, yeah.
And Melisandre was introduced in A Dance with Dragons kind of needlessly, because she's in a chapter in which Jon is in half of the chapter. So that, like, Jon, it could have been from Jon's perspective there anyway. The only thing that we got out of it was a little bit of, like, doubt about Melisandre's magic abilities, like grounding her, making her into more of a charlatan. Mm-hmm. That was the only benefit of kind of having the Melisandre perspective, but it could have been done without giving her a perspective. But it was sort of like warming us up to the idea that in the next book, at the wall, the perspective is going to be Melisandre. It's not going to be Jon. And so a lot of people think that, maybe Jon, at least in the Winds of Winter, will not be a perspective. But
oh, by the way, real quick, just so the audience is aware, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but if you hear any purring in the background, I promise that's not me. That is my cat who came in here. And
or your harem.
Don't even start with that one. Number 9. This is actually something I've argued for way back when I started my channel and started doing Thrones content, and I argued in favor and in agreement with this point. Number 9. The excessive sex and violence amounted to nothing. Extreme sex and violence were practically Game of Thrones' calling.
At least the sex scenes, the amount of sex scenes, it goes down massively in the second half of the show and is almost non-existent in like the final 2 seasons. The amount of sex scenes that we have in the first 4 seasons or a few seasons, and especially like the first season or second season as well, is so much larger than at the end of the show.
So much so that the gratuitous nudity and murder happened at least once in every episode. The show's defenders claim that these were necessary for the story's deconstructive goals and themes, but the series' conclusive big picture says otherwise. Brutal deaths and injuries were only really there for shock value's sake, while the series never really bothered to properly analyze the sexual violence on display. Instead, it portrayed the assaults...
Isn't the first point from this article that the show peaked at the Red Wedding and nothing after was able to come close to it or even surpass it. And now he's complaining about too much violence and nudity and sex in the show. Make up your mind. What do you want? Do you want the Red Wedding not to be the climax and peak of the show? Do you want Thrones to actually shock you even more at the end and be better and bigger and more gruesome? Or do you condemn that and say this is bad? Make up your mind.
Necessary for its female characters' development and toughening. In hindsight, Game of Thrones had a very
Yeah, exactly. Not only female characters get developed and changed via very gruesome events and violence happening to them. It's also the male characters. Jon died for fucking sakes. Theon was tortured an entire season long and got his genitals cut off. The men suffer just as much as women, and if they don't get through the suffering alive and change through that, also like Jaime who lost his hand, they just die and stay dead permanently. Just like Ned Stark, or Robb Stark, or Oberyn, or Stannis, or Renly, or Joffrey, or Tywin. It's not only the women suffering in the story. Game of Thrones is hard and fair. It punishes everyone, even those who are not guilty.
very immature understanding of sex and violence. So I kind of agree with this, but I also kind of disagree with it. Like, for certain characters, it's appropriate, like for Tyrion and Theon, and I guess you could argue for Dany in the first season.
Yeah.
I don't see the need for Dany to have any more sex or nude scenes after season 1. It's kind of pointless.
No, I mean I have to agree with it, even though I know that D&D were smart enough to know that they're smart enough to know that the message of A Song of Ice and Fire is anti-war and anti-violence fundamentally, but they just somehow didn't execute any of that. Like, you kind of get to the point at the end where the Hound says to Arya that you can't follow me because, you know, I'm not someone to look up to. Like, vengeance is not the way. And then he goes off and has this epic battle. Like, you know, like they'll put in the message and then they undermine that message.
No, they don't undermine it, because Arya listened to him and heeded his advice and went off. Instead of going to kill Cersei, she let go of her revenge lust and bloodthirstiness. She went off that and instead tried to help and save random people that she doesn't know. That the Hound still went on his revenge path because he was too old. He has been lurking or has been too much invested into his hate stance towards his brother. Hate has fully consumed him his entire life. He is too far gone. He was too far gone, but not Arya. That's the point. He still saw that Arya had humanity left in her and didn't want that to destroy her totally, so that she can have a better life than him.
Consistently, you know, or that, like, you know, Dany's moments of violence where we're supposed to be cheering her on, they kind of go shame, shame at the end with us. So
yes, exactly.
It's not that they weren't aware that of what they were supposed to be doing, but they didn't execute it well. Because I do agree that in the end it was shock, and it didn't provide any sort of, like, you know, moral lesson for the show. So, because the moral lesson at the end is really great stories bind us together. Like,
yes, and you two are proof of that. You two are friends because of A Song of Ice and Fire, a fictional story that connects millions of people. That message is true. And also, it's still anti-war. But let's have him make his point first.
Right? Like, that's the story in the end, right? Not all of this war was pointless and useless and horrible.
It was. This was directly also the message at the end. Because why are they having this gathering? Why are they having this gathering at the Dragon Pit in King's Landing? To figure out what to do with Jon Snow and Tyrion Lannister and to avoid another pointless bloodshedding war with the Unsullied. To avoid war and casualties. This is why the meeting is for. This is why they are talking instead of fighting each other. That's the message of it. Also supported by Davos standing up and telling Grey Worm that he knows how this will end if they don't find a peaceful solution. Thousands of you, thousands of them, you know how it ends. We need to find a better way. And Tyrion, who is turning to Grey Worm and saying, this is the wheel our queen wanted to break. Tyrion's new system about having a new king elected and chosen for his qualities, for his wisdom and capabilities and abilities, instead of being born to it by blood right or even earning it through conquest and war. Like most of the time in the show happens. This is rejected. Violence in order to become powerful or to become king and leader and ruler gets rejected and replaced by a soft democracy, not real democracy. Of course, they are not that far yet. This is why also the ending is so believable and convincing and realistic, because the entire system doesn't get changed overnight. It's still only the High Lords and Ladies deciding who is going to be the next ruler and king over them. But it's still a factor of opinion and decision making, and not using violence and force to become king. That system gets changed. Will it always stay like this? Will Westeros be peaceful forever now and there will never be wars again? No, of course not, because humans fundamentally don't change. Humans are still at their core bad, how do you say it in English? Egoistical, gruesome, and self-centric. Of course, there will still be corruption, there will still be violence and wars, but not on the foundation on which Westeros has suffered for the past hundreds of years because of succession and blood right and conquest. Because there's now a new system. This is the wheel that our queen wanted to break. Daenerys' talk about the wheel was about all those high houses fighting each other for power or for revenge, and that Daenerys was gonna break that wheel so that only one person would remain on top and no other would dare to start another war to challenge the ruler's claim. This has been rejected by this new system. It won't allow it. Of course, on paper, in practice, we would have to wait and see what would happen down the line. As I said, I'm realistic, I'm convinced, and I'm aware there's no perfect system that can ensure that there will be no more wars or violence. That would be very naive to believe that, but it's still a new system. And that's the message behind it. Preston is only complaining about it. He's only complaining about it because it's not spoon-fed to him. There's no character saying those exact lines, so he's not getting it. He can't put two and two together and come to this conclusion by himself. He needs a character to say to the camera, probably and preferably to him directly in the camera, this war has been pointless. That's why we have suffered. Yeah, that's the point. It's just not spoon-fed this way to you. And that's why you have a problem with it.
Like, that, right? That should have been the message. But the message in the end
It was.
is stories bind us. So
That's also true. Multiple messages can be applied and be valid at the same time. One doesn't contradict another. They just support each other. Stories and wisdom instead of conquest and blood right.
Seasons of characters walking through the Riverlands, seeing like the ravaged like countryside and no, that's
Yeah.
not. There's nothing.
I mean, especially I would say that I would say Arya is the the worst aspect of that. Like she is in the most gruesome, violent scenes of the whole show, and she never learns her lesson. She never grows.
Except at the end, when she listened to the Hound's advice and let go of her revenge and tried to save and help people instead.
She doesn't. We don't see the negative aspects of that on her. In the end, she goes off to have more adventures. Even though she participated in some of them she participated in the most gruesome things. Walder Frey's pies is the most gruesome thing that happened in the show, right?
No, I would argue that was Daenerys burning about 1 million people in King's Landing. Mass murder. Burning people alive. That was probably the worst crime in the show.
I mean, burning of Shireen is probably number 2, but Frey pie.
I believe there were more children burned in King's Landing.
It's number 1.
Yeah, she made Walder Frey eat his own son.
It's really like, they hate season 8, they are season 8 haters, but they are even denying the mere fact of what happened in season 8 episode 5 at the Belts episode. That mass murder where so many children were killed and burned. We saw this even with Arya trying to help this child and the mother falls to the ground and Arya's trying to get the child with her, but the child won't leave her mother's side and burns alongside her mother. And then Arya even sees the torched child and mother with also the burnt horse figure that the child was holding. Or was the mother holding it? I don't know. But they were burnt.
She forced him to eat his own sons, right? Like, there's nothing more disturbing. I mean, Stannis burning his own daughter is next, but it's what lesson did we learn from Arya doing that?
That revenge is pointless, and we saw how revenge gets to you and how it ends you with the Hound. There we have seen and the antithesis to that message. If you don't let go of revenge, revenge consumes you and kills you.
Don't fuck with the Starks?
I guess.
I disagree about the violence part simply because medieval times is a very violent place. So
sure.
Okay, but
the world in general, because humans are violent. Not only back then, but today as well.
The sex scenes, a lot of them were incredibly unnecessary, unless it was like Tyrion season 1, Dany season 1, Theon in seasons 1 and 2. Okay, I'll give you that, but there was a scene I recall that was incredibly unnecessary. Littlefinger, the scene is Littlefinger is watching a man receive a blowjob from a sex worker, and then the sex worker comes out of the room with cum dripping on her chin, and then proceeds to French another guy. I don't.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
You remember?
What's the point?
What's the point? And there's also a scene where Littlefinger in season 1, where Littlefinger is watching a lesbian scene between Roz and someone else, and he's giving his whole backstory, kinda, of how he wants Catelyn for himself. That was unnecessary. Like, there's just it is excessive, and I think the writers were on a podcast years ago.
Yes, and did you notice that you can only name the first few seasons, especially season 1 and 2, as an example for excessive sexual depiction? You can't accuse the later seasons of doing that.
Where they even admitted that sometimes they write these in there just to see these actors and actresses in these positions.
Sure. I mean, I would say, I'm trying to think, because you are right. Like, the Theon Roz sex stuff, the only purpose was to give Theon screen time during season 1. It didn't lead anywhere. Like him.
And showing how important sex is for Theon, that this is the core and a very important part of his personality and character, and then to take this away from him 2 seasons later. This was the payoff. and the point of those scenes.
Having a relationship with Roz had no effect on the plot.
But it's also to show him as like kind of like a, not really a playboy, but like how the scene with him and Roz, and then later on with him and Osha, where he's not really having sex because he's a charismatic guy who gets it easy. He's just, kind of a shallow douchebag type of guy who has really nothing really going for him other than he's like,
Yeah, I guess so. And they're establishing Tyrion one way, and then Dany and Drogo's sexual relationship is a relevant plot point because it's specifically how she gains control over him.
And how she develops Stockholm Syndrome and falls in love with her rapist.
And I would argue later on, Loras and Olivar's sex scenes are relevant to the plot. But I'm trying to think anyone else's. Like for instance, there's a random scene in which they're preparing for the Blackwater, and so the Hound and Bronn go to the whorehouse and are surrounded by naked women.
The Hound comes in at the tavern while there's a sex worker on Bronn's lap.
Right, and you think, oh, they're gonna fight, and then they don't fight.
Right.
And you're like, well, what was the point of that?
Isn't this episode even written by George R. R. Martin? I'm aware that his episodes were rewritten by Dan and Dave pretty heavily, so maybe this is even an instance where Dan and Dave wrote this scene in and not Martin himself. But the episode itself, Martin is credited as the writer for it.
Just so we could see some naked women, But yeah, no, you're right that they don't really lead. None of it leads anywhere. Like
it all does. Every sex scene has a purpose. Every sex scene, even the ones between Missandei and Grey Worm, to show how much they care for each other and how much a killing machine like Grey Worm is able to lower his guard and show vulnerability towards her, to make us understand how devastated he is when she gets killed and why he becomes so important later on by leading the Unsullied after Daenerys has been killed. Also, another important sex scene between Jaime and Cersei in Season 7. To have that contrast with Jaime's sex scene with Brienne in Season 8, where afterwards he looks very unfulfilled, very unhappy after having sex with Brienne. But then you look back at his sex scene with Cersei in Season 7 and how much happier and fulfilled he looks after that. To show that Cersei is his love in life and not Brienne, to make his relapse for Cersei more understandable and convincing. Are there more examples of sex scenes that we needed? Of course, we needed Jon and Daenerys sex scene. We needed Jon and Ygritte. I can't think of any sex scene that was pointless.
Most of these sex scenes.
Like, you don't have to have, and I appreciate these because Anna Chaplin, who played Talisa, very gorgeous. You don't have to have a Robb Stark, Anna Chaplin, or Talisa sex scene. You can give us the impression. Maybe it's him, maybe it's Robb. He's kind of like, naked from the waist up, and he's reading a letter, and you can see Talisa in the back, and the implication that they had sex, that's fine. The implications are fine. But actual full-blown sex scenes, I think that's just HBO being HBO.
Yeah, but why is that bad? That's one and more point for Game of Thrones for being unique and brave and different than any other story out there. They do it even if it is not 100% necessary to get the scene across, but it supports and makes the scene even stronger because it's so real, because we have two loving people naked next to each other.
Oh, that's what they were known for.
It is HBO being HBO. It's HBO's signature. You just having it there for the sake of it. But
the funny thing is, like, sex scenes at this point are just kind of whatever. Like, back in the day, before the internet was like really in there,
that's the way people got nudity and got sex was through these little teasings on HBO. And these are the days in which young kids would listen to the Playboy channel through the squiggly lines. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I don't actually, but I get I kind of.
So back in the day, when you got a cable box, they would unlock certain channels that you paid for, and so when the stuff that was unlocked still had the audio, and then it would have squiggly. The picture would be squiggling around, so you couldn't see it. Well, sometimes like the squiggles would not squiggle so much, and you could sort of see something. And so, it was just kind of this like very little boy thing of like watching the Playboy channel and looking through the squiggly lines and trying to see a boobie. Like it squiggled up while listening to the audio. Like this was I mean, this is what the world had before. And that's if you were lucky enough to even have cable, so like.
That was way back when, and now you can get porn on your iWatch. So it's
exactly.
But no, it's HBO being HBO. Theon's sex scenes. It's him thinking with his cock, and drives forward later as to who he becomes, and like Daenerys, Drogo relevant, but like the scene in season.
Why is it relevant? Why are they not talking about the obvious, about the rape and Daenerys' mental damage that she suffered from it? Why are they not talking about it? They're just saying the fact, yeah, it's important. But why? Because that would give season 8 legitimacy and build up since the very first seasons, and they don't want to admit that.
3, where Dario comes to proclaim his loyalty for Dany, and she's bathing, and she gets up, and you just see her breasts. I mean, Emilia Clarke is hot. I like boobs,
right.
But I don't feel like this is necessary.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Especially if you're gonna go to a marine and not have like in the books. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a minute. Isn't there like a fashion style to have one breast out?
It is. It's funny that when they had that opportunity, they didn't take advantage.
They didn't take it. Like, so what's the point?
Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not a prude, and I'm not shocked by sex on the screen. And if they want to put it in, it's fine as long as it doesn't take away from anything. Like I think it is kind of ridiculous that we live in a society where it's okay for children to watch violence, but it's not okay for them to watch sex. Like who cares? Like
it's only that way in the USA, not in Europe or Germany. There, it's the other way around.
So it's not that I don't mind like having the sex and be part of the plot, as long as it's part of the plot. Like what's the point if it's not? Of course, we had a lot of violence that was not part of the plot either. So, less so. It didn't feel as shoehorned, but there was definitely some violence in the show that just wasn't in the book as well, just because they wanted to throw in some violence.
It's HBO being HBO. Number 8, character deaths now come across as cheap gimmicks. If there's something more synonymous with Game of Thrones than wanton violence, it was major character deaths. The dark fantasy made a name for itself by promising not to spare anyone, and this was made clearest through Ned Stark's execution when he was a focal character. Though Ned's demise was pivotal, almost every death after it was not. What was once a
Not really.
truly mortifying twist became a predictable jump scare, so much so that viewers and
Including the Red Wedding?
even the show were more...
I guess that's not the point they're trying to make. But it would be consistent. They said everything after Ned Stark's death was just a gimmick and made for shock. But Ned's death wasn't made for shock. Or what?
interested in counting down characters' death than following their personal journeys. This may have been a fun drinking game at the show's height, but it doesn't make for a good drama in a rewatch.
Didn't people complain that not enough major characters died at Long Night in Season 8?
I disagree with this.
I mean, no one, I would say the reverse happened. Like there weren't any deaths. Like, there weren't any deaths for a long...
Oh, there were, like Season 5 at many deaths, Season 6, 7, especially Season 8.
Long time.
That truly mattered.
That truly mattered, of, like, really important, like, you know, characters, right? Like, after the death of Oberyn, who, by the way, never got to be an important character because, you think he's going to be an important character, and then he's not. So it's not even Oberyn.
He was a fan favorite. The fan favorite does not mean important.
Right. I would say the big
What does make one character important?
shockers are Ned dying, Jaime losing his hand, and the Red Wedding.
But that's not a death either. You could argue the other way that this is also plot armor that Jaime should have died. By blood loss, or by being killed by the bear, that there was plot armor. You can make the argument either way.
Right? And then
I'm sure there's something else. What about Marjorie and the Tyrell clan and
I mean the Tyrell clan, but that's it takes the entire Tyrell clan like blowing up at once for it to be shocking. But even
it's not even the entire Tyrell clan. The only two big Tyrells that we knew were Lois and Marjorie. Olenna wasn't even there. And Marjorie was a big and important character. She was the queen, for fuck's sake. At the time, she was the queen.
I guess Marjorie grew to be a fairly large character. It's just that she's not that large of a character in the books, so we just kind of go, oh, okay. But they grew her character in the show and then killed her off. I mean, I guess Marjorie and the High Sparrow, because he did it at the same time.
High Sparrow I expected, but I did not expect Marjorie or Loras. That I did not expect.
Of course,
if the High Sparrow counts as a big character, then so does Ramsay or Roose or Balon Greyjoy. Or hell, even Rickon Stark. Hodor, Usher, the Dothraki cards, like those were all characters that died in season 6.
Of course, we hadn't seen for a while, so. But yeah, the Sept. There was the Sept, but that was like a lot of B characters and not a single A character, right? Like not. Had they killed a single A character before season 8,
I want to say Olenna, but she is.
Is this an admission that there are major character deaths in season 8? I'm very curious whether they will address or touch them at all or in the slightest. I'm afraid they won't.
B, maybe even C character. That death was obviously she just drinks poison. It's cuts the black.
Yeah, I suppose Barristan, but he's almost just a B character too.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Guess what? Not every character can be an A+ character. The 8 protagonists, the 8 main characters of the story are, of course, Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Bran, Arya, Sansa, Jaime, and Cersei. This is it. Those are the 8 main characters. And most of them survived, even if one of them already died in between with Jon. But out of those 8, only 3 characters stayed dead. Jaime, Cersei, Daenerys. Then you could also make the argument that Bran died and it's only the three-eyed raven that is left. That Arya died multiple times and was brought back. You can make that argument, or that the wave killed Arya and we never got to see it. That this mystery is still open and was never answered or addressed.
But then you start thinking of those top tier characters, Dany and Jorah, Theon.
Dany died.
Asha.
Theon died.
Yara, Cersei, Jaime.
They both died.
Tyrion, Jon.
Died in season 5.
None of them are dying. Not even Sam. None of them are dying.
Yeah, but what does it matter whether many characters or this character dies? That's not a measurement of quality. If character deaths were a measure of quality, a bar for quality, then The Walking Dead would be the best story, the best show in the world, and it isn't. That's not a measure for quality. A measure for quality is the story. Is it powerful or not? And Sam's story wasn't over. His story was to correct Archmaester Ibus by telling him to rename his book the Chronicles and wars following the death of King Robert into A Song of Ice and Fire, becoming the new Grand Maester at King's Landing at the end. That's why Sam couldn't just die, because he still had a purpose and a role in the story that he had to fulfill. The role that the showrunners, David and Dan, or even George Martin himself, decided for him to have. That's also another point. Both deaths is not a measurement of quality, and neither is plot armor. Plot armor is not a measure of quality as well, in a sense, oh, there's so much plot armor, this is so bad. No, it's just the story being told the way the storyteller decided to tell it. If this was a measurement, then Breaking Bad would be a horrible story, because Walter should have died 10 times in the series finale in the final episode on its own. Or Lord of the Rings is bad, because there are no major character deaths at all. But no one says that, because that's nonsense. That's not how to judge a story in a fair manner. That's just childish and pointless complaining. Because all of this is not a measure of quality. It's just a reason for you to complain about it. As if a big character death count makes the story better for you. It doesn't. Evidently it doesn't. Season 8 has the most major character deaths with Jaime, Cersei and Daenerys, and probably the biggest people death count, not characters themselves, but people death count, because of the battle at Winterfell and King's Landing of the entire show. It has the highest death toll in the entire story. And yet that still doesn't make it for you that you will praise and love this season just because there are so many characters and people that died. Because that's not a measurement of quality. In both directions it isn't.
Jamie.
I don't think. See, this is where it's hard for me to agree or disagree, and I got to remain kind of neutral on this, because at the same time, the opposite can be true. Like if you kill off, I don't know, if you kill off Jamie in season 6, well, now you're just killing Jamie off because you got nothing else to do. Or now you're just killing Jamie off for...
Exactly. This is just pointless. Like, this is complaining, oh, they are not killing off characters just for the sake of killing off characters. To say, oh, look how brave we are. We ruin the story by taking characters out of the story whose stories are not even finished yet.
Or a shock or whatever. But if you don't kill off Jamie, you'll get criticized the same way. I feel like it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, I think the difference is that, when
There again, I have to agree with Carmine, with Red Team Review. He's making good points.
Death really is important, and it changes the plot. Like, Ned dying has huge implications. I mean, right? It causes the Northern independence and it causes the war to start. Even Oberyn.
Not really. Robb Stark was already on his war path to free Ned before Ned got killed. Renly left the capital before Ned died as well and was making his moves, just like Stannis Baratheon. Everyone was already preparing for war before Ned's death.
Who is, not a major character. His death is a major ripple in that it causes the entire Dorne plot. So you can say that these deaths matter. But when you finally get around to killing off Jorah, what did it do?
It isolated Daenerys even more. It took a very important social pillar from her, a father, a mentor, a teacher figure for her, someone who was able to talk her out of committing mass murder, like in season 4 when she was about to kill all masters of Yunkai, and Jorah told her, then you would not be better than those people. Then you would treat them just like beasts, like those masters were treating slaves. And you want to be better and different, don't you? And that's why she didn't do it. She listened to Jorah's advice. That's the purpose. Taking someone away who matters to Daenerys, who cares about Daenerys, and who is like a foundation for her mental health.
Like when you finally got around to killing off Theon, what did it do? You know,
It hold off the Night King so that Arya has more time to get there and kill the Night King.
like Sansa had to cry for 15 minutes. You know, one could make an argument that Jorah was a piece of straw on the back of the Dany story, but
Exactly.
he's just one piece of straw with everything else.
Yeah, or are you it's another admission that there are many straws, many things, many factors influencing the Daenerys' storyline at the end. Is this an admission? I thought it came out of nowhere. I thought it was out of character. I thought there was no foundation. I thought it was bad writing and pacing, but suddenly there are straws. Tell me more about those straws.
You know,
Mance's death didn't mean anything. Now I'm thinking about it too.
Yeah.
It did mean a lot, in a way that Jon Snow became the new leader of the Wildlings instead.
Everything went on exactly as it would have had he been alive. So why would he still cross the wall?
Now this is very insincere by Carmine Wetting review, because he knows the storyline in the books, including Mance Rayder, is much different. It makes a lot of difference as well, whether he's alive or not.
Right, and then they started trashing Mance, you know. And granted, I wouldn't put all the blame on the show here, because as much as people claim George R. Martin just kills off characters, he doesn't. Okay, in the books, he's killed off one major point of view character, and that's Ned. You know,
I would argue
well, two, Ned and Catelyn.
There's no plot armor in Game of Thrones. Every action has a consequence. You know, Robb betraying Walder Frey.
Just like Jon telling Sansa of his parentage also had the biggest consequence in the entire story in season 8.
Consequences to that. You don't get away with that just because you're king of the North, or Ned's son, or
Jon didn't get away with that. His life was ruined.
One of I guess you could argue the main characters, if not point of view characters. Same with Catelyn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just that when a character dies and there's no real repercussions. Like even when Cersei blew up the Sept,
the Faith had no response to this.
Right.
What are those weak, unwashed, unarmed people gonna do against Cersei when she can just send the Mountain out and crush people's heads on the street, not even accounting her her main remaining forces of the Gold Cloaks or Lannister army and her soldiers? What are people without armor and weapons gonna do about it? Nothing. Just like House of the Dragon, what did the people do immediately after Rhaenyra killed the High Sept? Nothing. We know there will be repercussions, there will be consequences for it down the line, but not immediately after, just like with Cersei. There were no consequences immediately after her blowing up the Sept, but her consequences eventually were her and Jaime's and her child's death at the end of season 8.
Blew up the freaking Pope and the Vatican together, and nothing. Crickets.
Except her death, and losing like half the kingdom's support. I'm aware not only because she killed the Sept, but that's also the consequence of her becoming queen, because Tommen committed suicide, because she blew up the Sept and killed Marjorie.
So it's I think that's a bit of it. It's not just the shock value of killing off a character. It's the shock value of killing off a character and having
no repercussions
afterwards.
There were. You are just blind to see it.
I think that's really the thing.
Number 7 here. I don't feel like I need to go into this too much because it's completely true, and you've argued this several times. Number 7, the characters became less complex and nuanced over time.
This is a good one. Good joke.
Oh yeah, well yeah, of course. Once you're getting off the book material, I mean, what are you gonna do?
The best quote of the entire show is in season 5 from a show original scene. The freedom to make my own mistakes was all I ever wanted, from Mance Rayder. Season 5, episode 1. Not in the books at all.
Nothing else needs to be said. Number 6,
Yeah.
the grand.
Yeah, because you can't argue for this case either way. You just assume everyone thinks the same way, so you don't need to provide any examples or evidence because everyone is already convinced that the sky is green.
The only character, and I've complimented this in the past. I'd say the only character that becomes more complicated is
Grey Worm?
Dario.
Oh.
No, I'd say Dario. Oh, actually, no. You're right. You're okay.
Or Grey Worm.
You named another one, Grey Worm.
Mhm.
Okay, I'd say Grey Worm and Dario both grew and became more complicated in time, and we're interesting. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you on Grey Worm. Yeah. Okay.
Number 6, the grand finale isn't worth it. I don't even feel like I need to go into this one. That needs no explanation.
Yeah, I mean, which grand finale 1 or grand finale 2, but neither one.
Number 5.
Season 8 had 2 major climaxes, the battle at Winterfell and King's Landing.
I disagree with. Any potential sequels and spin-offs are unnecessary and unwanted. One of the worst things that Game of Thrones finale did was...
Thus far, House of the Dragon and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms have only supported the main story and its ending and made the story even more legendary and built more foundation for the main story lessons. For example, by having the Three-Eyed Raven even more involved than in the main show in House of the Dragon, by having him walking dragons all the time, by influencing characters' actions like Daemon and Aemond's or Helena's. And also in Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, who told us the meaning of the white horse, the bridge between life and death, and there is more to life than just a void after death.
Prioritize teases for future sequels and spin-offs instead of wrapping things up properly. The showrunners and HBO were so assured of their flagship series' success that they prematurely planned an expanded universe, but it might be dead on arrival. What? Following the finale...
Yeah, but I don't remember them doing this before.
Debunked by every metric that there is that shows how successful House of the Dragon and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms have been.
Or the end of Game of Thrones.
They were whispers of
whispers,
like
okay.
Yeah. Following the finale's harsh rejection, prequels like Blood Moon with a pilot that cost $30 million and others were axed, which is not really true. The upcoming House of the Dragon, meanwhile, is inspiring more ridicule than hype. Anyone who's actually interested in an expanded Game of Thrones universe will be wasting their time with a rewatch that teases a roadmap that's leading nowhere. See, about this, okay, the best example I can give is Amazing Spider-Man 2, where that guy is walking through the hallway and you can see like the Sinister Seven equipment there, Vulture wings, like that is what I think of when I see like them trying to do an expanded universe while the movie's going. I don't think Game of Thrones did this.
No, it's not like there was a scene in season 8 where they're like, you know, the thing about Rhaenyra, like no one did that, right?
No one.
No. So that did not happen in the show. Like even if they were planning on stuff, you know, none of it showed up. None of it showed up in season 8. Right? There was nothing about, you know, a Blood Moon prequel or House of the Dragon in season 8 where we're sitting there going, I mean, unless he's thinking that Jon and Dany looking in the caves at the Thedas carved in the wall was like Blood Moon stuff, you know, or Ned Umber.
There were a lot of links between season 8 and House of the Dragon. I uploaded a video on it here as well, but it's in German. For example, the dagger that ended the long night, a female Targaryen queen being challenged by the claim of a male successor with Jon Snow, aka Aegon, and Daenerys, and in House of the Dragon with Aegon and Rhaenyra, just to name a few examples. There are links, definitely, but again, it's not spoon-fed, it's not as obvious in your face as people like Weston or Writing Review would have preferred to understand it.
Like, you know, crucified on the wall with his like swirly fire was some blood moon thing,
Swirly fire.
or whatever it was,
First off, and in your comment section, I've seen it. In my comment section, I've seen it. People are saying whenever we do House of the Dragon, anything, someone's like, "Bro, who cares? Who cares?"
It's
you
true.
Came, I came to watch this video and comment on it. Clearly, you care on some level.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is people there's gonna be this curiosity.
People are hypocrites.
Curiosity. Like I admit that like he's not completely wrong that the fandom has been traumatized by season 8, and they have.
This is like the most true statement out of the entire video thus far. They've been traumatized by season 8. That's true, yes.
Really negative feelings about House of the Dragon coming out, but at the same time, like there's still this massive curiosity. Like, what's it going to be like? What's it going to be like? Like people can't look away.
And I just noticed all those points, those 5 points that have been brought up thus far, nothing of that has to do with a rewatch. Nothing of this has to do with self-reflection or insight or anything. It's not about viewing the White Walkers differently, reviewing the Nero story or Jaime's stories or Jon's story or Arya's story or Bran's story or Sansa's story differently. It's not about self-reflection at all thus far. What a rewatch is supposed to do with you. It's stuff that you can basically already observe upon your first exposure to the story, by first viewing the story, and by being able to complain about it already then and there. You don't need a rewatch to complain about plot armor, to complain about too much sex and violence or anything like that. You don't need a rewatch to do it or to see it.
This is like when Attack of the Clones came out, right? Everybody's just like, man, Star Wars is ruined because the Phantom Menace was horrible. Yeah. And then, you know what they did? They went out and they fucking still went to Attack of the Clones and it sucked. True. And then they were like, fuck, I've been burned too many times. I'm definitely not going to go see Revenge of the Sith. And then they fucking still went out and went and saw Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, people are hypocrites and so fragile they can't even stick to their own words.
So I don't know. I don't know if the IP has been destroyed or not.
I don't think so.
No, it hasn't.
Find out when House of the Dragon premieres, but
when it premieres, is this video even older? Because the premiere of House of the Dragon was already 4 years ago. So was this like somewhere in 2022 before the release of season 1? Ooh, then this aged even worse.
It's true that the fandom's in a weird place right now. I'll grant that, right? It's in a weird place.
The fandom is cautious, if anything. It's because we've only had one series, and this whole expanded universe thing, House of the Dragon will really make or break it. So
I mean, but I would say there's two things going at once, though. There's two big things in the fandom that are causing weird feelings, and that is one, the end of Game of Thrones, and then two, George's like inability to produce Winds of Winter, and those two pillars of toxicity are like poisoning everything.
Yeah, but it's mostly coming from book purists and haters, not from lovers, not from people who understood season 8 and Game of Thrones as a whole. They don't complain about the ending. They don't complain that there are no more books to fulfill their dreams and wishes and to give them the confirmation that their fan theories, predictions, headcanons and worldviews were correct. I don't need that confirmation because season 8 already gave me the answer, gave me the ending to the story.
See what happens. We'll see what happens. I'm saying they're justified. I mean, I'm part of those pillars. I'm like, oh God, but like they
at least he is self-aware again.
There's definitely two things souring the IP.
Predicted everything it set up thematically.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, it contradicted every major fan theory, every major popular fan theory, prediction, headcanon, and destroyed some worldviews along the way as well. That doesn't make it a bad story. That makes it a brave, innovative, and genius story that dares to go another way.
It was a big anti-war tale about
Oh no, it's... Am I alive? Am I good? Yeah.
how we shouldn't have spent our time like fighting each other and should have like, united together to fight a common cause. And in the end, like, and how like violence destroys the human soul from the inside out. And in the end, like all of the violence that the main characters like participated in, it didn't do anything to him. Like Sansa was fine, Jon was fine.
Sansa was raped multiple times on a daily basis. Jon got killed. Jon is a traumatized and hurt soul at the end of the story, who had to kill his love to save the world.
Arya was fine.
After being traumatized and her childhood taken away from her and having everyone die around her loved ones, family members, it's bittersweet. Of course, they got a relatively happy ending, but it's no Disney, it's no they are good and they are not broken, they are not scarred for life. No. But they try to do better and not to have all of the traumas and bad experience taking them down.
He writes here, when it began, Game of Thrones was basically a high fantasy brought down to a dirty and harsh reality. The knights and lords were far from noble, magic only made a bad situation worse, power was inherently corrupt, and so on. However, what seemed like a deconstruction of medieval society was really an affirmation and defense of it. In the controversial 8th season, power returned to the heroic elite after they executed a few bad actors, including a queen who led the oppressed and laughed at the idea of democracy. Everything Game of Thrones set out to deconstruct wasn't just reconstructed, but fortified by a tone-deaf finale.
I mean, they tried. Like, there's aspects where they're clearly trying. Like, they're trying to claim that, like, Tyrion was this, like, rehabilitated character, that he made all of these mistakes and now he can be a good ruler. But they never really established him as a bad ruler. He kind of says it at the end, like, oh, I thought I was wise and I wasn't. And you're like, well, we really needed more emphasis on that, because throughout the whole series, he was portrayed as the clever guy who like no one listened to. Was really the smartest guy in the room,
But now he is going against the popular hater lore that Tyrion was destroyed and made dumb, stupid in the final season. But he is now not acknowledging that Tyrion made mistakes, that he fucked up from time to time. He did make mistakes, but he's mature enough and honest enough to admit those and to improve himself.
Yeah, it's true though. I don't think that the whatever themes they're going for, which are like war is bad, vengeance bad, like they somehow failed on those like really simple themes.
Not really, you just failed to understand them properly. Game of Thrones gave everyone... There were 4 major slaps that Game of Thrones gave its own audience in the final season. A political slap, a theological slap, a how is it told in English? Philosophical slap, and an ethic slap. The political slap were many left-leaning people falling for a feminist icon, a ruler, a beautiful young queen that talked about fighting oppression and inequalities and who ended up killing the very people she intended to save, who is basically personified left extremism, communism, who kills and ends up killing those people, everyone who disagrees with her, and kills her own people at the end. That's the slap left people had to endure. Then the theological slap that a divine being without human flaws was made king at the end. That not a person, not a regular human being is made or best suited to rule over people. That's the theological slap. Then the how is it? I can't pronounce it in English, philosophical slap at the end. that we don't know whether Daenerys was right or wrong in the long run, whether killing all those people was right or wrong in the long run, whether that would have led to a better life for other people, then the ethical slap that was killing Daenerys. Was it right to kill Daenerys or not? Was it right to cheer for a tyrant in disguise or not? Are these people to blame for being unable to see through a tyrant's propaganda? Those were 4 slaps, thematical slaps that people had to endure watching the ending. It's not just about war and vengeance. Game of Thrones is much deeper and better than that.
But okay. Yeah.
So, number 3 on this list, I kind of disagree with, simply because it sounds wrong to imply that Thrones can't stand on its own merits, but I digress. Number 3, the series was not as dark or mature as it claimed to be. One of Game of Thrones' selling point was that it was the grown-up answer to idealistic high fantasies like The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Westeros' saga could be read as Martin's deconstruction of such stories, especially since he made his misgivings with J.R.R. Tolkien's epic public. However, Game of Thrones ended up dark, not mature. In truth, Game of Thrones was just The Lord of the Rings with an R rating. Westeros had more blood, profanity, and sex than Middle-earth ever had, but it never went beyond being an edgy fantasy. The series rushing out a jarring, saccharine ending is only more proof of its lack of commitment to its supposed maturity. I disagree with this point from the article, mainly because it's kind of an unfair thing to compare the two. Like, even though it's a common comparison that happens all the time, Thrones has enough going for it to stand on its own 2 feet. You know, like, other fantasy series kind of rely on The Lord of the Rings to keep fans familiar with, like, world building, other elements. Because if you've read or seen Lord of the Rings, you kind of, you know, a lot of the new fantasy stuff, you're kind of familiar with what's going on, orcs, elves, all that stuff. But George doesn't really do that. Saying Game of Thrones is an edgy Lord of the Rings is like saying Dune is an edgy Star Trek. Not really.
Here's the problem is that A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones are released at different times, and so the fantasy world is in 2 different places at those 2 different times. So it is true that when Lord of the Rings, the books, are published, high fantasy has a kind of idealized, like, fun, adventurous kind of attitude. And then there is a shift. There is a movement that Game of Thrones is very much part of, but Wheel of Time is part of this movement as well, of moving from, like, good, clean, high fantasy, swashbuckling adventure fun to, like, dark, gritty realism. And that Game of Thrones is that dark, gritty realism, and so it's, like, revolutionary, you know, in 1996. The problem is that Lord of the Rings movies come out after 1996, and they are much darker than Lord of the Rings books. And so,
but still not even half as dark as Game of Thrones, both the books and the show.
You're already on this, like, transition to dark. That, you know, that's appearing. So, like, when Game of Thrones comes out, I would say it's still pretty freaking dark compared to fantasy, but it's part of this, like, transition. And so it's not really contrasted to. I would say that Game of Thrones, the show, and Lord of the Rings, the movies, are not as different as A Song of Ice and Fire, the books, is to Lord of the Rings. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does. And I just don't agree with this point, because I don't think any show that came out back then, and even in the 2000s, was trying to be edgy. I just think it was trying to be on HBO.
Well, first of all, anything you're going to put on HBO, it comes off like HBO.
That's it.
Right?
Exactly. It's
right. There's got to be tits and violence in every HBO show.
I am currently watching Succession for the first time, also a very popular and critically acclaimed HBO series. And thus far, there's been very limited nudity in the show.
So that's gonna be
Honestly,
there.
that's kind of where we are in television right now. You're either getting you're either getting HBO or you're getting CW.
Yeah.
And along the way, there's some things in between. You know,
that's a perfect example because you're right that CW still has that kind of like adventurous, clean kind of like feel to everything, right?
And this is also another claim, by the way, that Game of Thrones can't stand on its own feet. You can make this observation already by watching the show for the first time. You don't need to rewatch it to come to this conclusion. Again, I don't get why the title is about rewatching. Probably because it gains more clicks, because it baits someone with the idea of having new thoughts and new insights because of a rewatch, but it's basically just points that you can make already by first exposure to the show.
Characters like a fucking supermodel, and then you do have some stuff in between, like I'm watching right now the Halo show, and unfortunately I am, and the Halo show, or even Netflix's Cowboy Bebop. It's somewhere between HBO and CW because yes, you see some ass and some violence, but it's still like a high fly adventure where all the characters are supermodel, good looking, and the stakes aren't really that high, and there's still plot armor there, so it's in the middle. But I think you sum it up perfectly. I think it's not. I think the series was not as dark or mature as it claimed to be. I don't think it claimed to be anything. I just claimed it. If anything, it claimed to be on HBO, and it fucking.
that's the thing, right?
Yeah. It's...
I mean, that's the thing. Is it as revolutionary as people think it is? And it's like
it definitely was. It changed the TV landscape for good. It made big budget fantasy shows being a thing and being possible to produce in the first place because HBO and Game of Thrones proved that those shows can be profitable and earn you a shit ton of money and be very successful at the Emmy Academy and blow everyone away. Game of Thrones was a pioneer. It was the first of its kind. A serious, mature, big budget medieval fantasy show with very dark elements. And thus came all the copycats with the Witcher series, with the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power series, with the Wheel of Time series, Cloak and Dagger, and also other shows that were also or book adaptations that were even done on HBO itself, like the Golden Compass show that was done. All of those big budgets, high dependence on CGI and mystical fantasy beings was only done in the shadow of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was the rocket that launched this genre into a new level, into the TV scope level, where you had multiple seasons with multiple episodes that are an hour long and still have a massive budget. This wasn't a thing before Game of Thrones. Before Game of Thrones, you only had like trash medieval fantasy shows or low budget slop like Mystic Knights, Hercules, Senna, and all this stuff. But nothing in terms of great storytelling or big budget production value like Game of Thrones was.
I don't know. I mean, I think in some ways it was just lucky. It became the pop cultural thing.
No, that has nothing to do with luck. I can tell you that was passion by Dan and Dave. That was competence by everyone involved in the show, and that was the greatness of the foundation of George R. R. Martin's world of A Song of Ice and Fire. It wasn't luck. It was the total package that made Game of Thrones so great. It wasn't luck at all. It was rather the opposite. Game of Thrones had more misfortunes than luck because they had to reshoot the entire pilot that was a failure and a disaster at the beginning. Yeah, it was maybe luck that HBO was willing to give them more money to try the pilot again. Yes, that could have been labeled as luck, but not everything after, not every episode after. That was pure talent and passion and competence.
that everybody decided to focus on, right?
Preston, you have no idea the luck involved in the like I don't know if you've read that making of the show book yet, but the luck of everything involved in making season 1, that is lightning in the bottle.
There's lightning in a bottle.
Holy
Because you're talking
shit.
about a bunch of unknown actors on that with a that had a really crappy pilot.
With showrunners who like didn't have the best reputation.
Right.
If at all.
At all.
Yeah, because this is the first show that they ran. They had no reputation and also no bad reputation like Writing Review is suggesting right here, because they haven't done anything like this before. David Benioff wrote the scripts for a few movies, he wrote some books, but that's it. And this makes the feat even more impressive. It's their first show and they just made the biggest show of all time. The biggest drama, serious storytelling show that we have ever had.
You know, X-Men Origins Wolverine with a writer who was kind of a wash up, right? You know, before Ice and Fire, like who also did not have the best record, you know.
That is true. George R. R. Martin, what was, besides Beauty and the Beast, what else did he have him involved with fail?
I mean, so in Hollywood, he just did Beauty and the Beast, and he did some episodes of The Twilight Zone and Outer Limits. he didn't do that much in Hollywood, actually. But then before that, his writing career had failed. He was this really, you know, up and coming, you know, sci-fi writer who won all these awards, and then he put out the Armageddon rag, and it didn't really do that great. It didn't do well at all. Even Fever Dream was only a lukewarm success, and then Armageddon rag was just bombed, and so he thought his writing career was over, or at least his novel writing career was over. So I mean, you think, you know, he's doing these like kind of shit shows in Hollywood and Wild Cards, you know, like that's his life. And so it's a good thing, you know, A Song of Ice and Fire, like, you know, was became the sleeper hit, and then was picked up with Game of Thrones.
Well, I'm going to touch back on what you just said, but number 2, we've discussed this briefly with his most recent update, and I guess we can discuss it again briefly, because I feel like we've discussed it ad nauseum. Number 2, the series tarnished its source material's legacy and reputation. Before it was adapted into live action, Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire was one of the premier fantasy series in bookstores and libraries. The HBO show's first few seasons validated its quality even more and catapulted it into the public consciousness. But then its closing seasons dropped the balls, blah, 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 blah. Today,
dropped the balls by becoming even bigger, by gathering an even larger audience than the first seasons had, by winning more Emmys than the first seasons. Yeah, a complete failure at the end.
Game of Thrones as a whole has been reduced to a cautionary tale and punchline almost nobody wants to mention or even remember.
Except you right now, who is writing this article, and those 2 guys talking about your article.
The series' failures made many viewers and readers question if the source material was any good in the first place, with any excitement for the last 2 books giving way to disinterest and mockery. Untrue. Any person, almost every single person who watched Game of Thrones watched it with a friend who read the books, and the friend, and I can guarantee.
No, statistically, I don't see this being true at all. Like 80% of the book readers only read the books after having watched, or at least after the first season of Game of Thrones has started airing in 2011. So the majority didn't sit there with someone who has read the books before. The show made the majority read the books, not the other way around.
You 9 times out of 10, that one person that a show only fan watched with the book reader fan. The book reader fan always told the show the books are better.
Yes, if you are a unreasonable book purist, then of course.
Oh, I mean, look, the books. There's just no doubt that like the books are genius. Like there's
Yeah, they are just like the show.
nothing like them. There's nothing like them. There's nothing like them in complexity and storytelling and scope and everything. Like
Except Game of Thrones.
they're-
Or One Piece.
we would have been able to put out just countless videos for like years and years, like analyzing this shit.
Yeah.
Had it not been like the most ambitious thing, that's come out in decades. Like it's the book's incredible. Now, did the show tarnish the legacy? Well,
No.
it only tarnished it in the sense that it affected the man, and the man went and tarnished his own legacy by choosing not to finish the books.
100.
And he already made that decision before season 1 even aired. It took him 11 years to publish a sequel for his third book, and even that wasn't complete because he had to skip or push back all those climaxes from book 5 into the next book, book 6, that we will never get.
10%. I was going to say the exact same thing. Because, like, first off, with any excitement for the last 2 books giving way to disinterest and mockery, if anything, the last couple of seasons that sucked are giving people more hope that the books will just be better. And they're more interested in the unreleased books. And where's the mockery? Once again, every single book reader who watched the show only fan most likely had this conversation where they said to their show only fan friends, trust me, the books will be better. The books will do the ending justice.
Right.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't like you, and you're right about this. We discussed it in the other video. The only
Again, I like to bring up this point all the time. David and Dan put in more effort in highlighting Daenerys' dark impulses, growing her god complex, showcasing the White Walkers as a huge threat, and building Jaime's and Cersei's relationship over 5 seasons than Martin did in 5 books.
To be on the Mount Rushmore of top fantasy writers with Tolkien, and Frank Herbert and all that. I just don't think he's going to be on there because I don't think he wants to finish. I don't think he wants anything to do with Ice and Fire as much as he does, doing everything he's ever wanted to do by being a famous book guy, which is doing everything but finish the books.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't think he's as mortal as he is. He thinks he can somehow do all of this. He can't. It's a sad thing, but it's like I can't blame. I don't blame Game of Thrones for it, and I don't blame.
You see what I meant when I was talking earlier about reasonable book purists? That's Preston Jacobs. He's not blaming the show, like the reaction I did earlier with this book purist, or was he even book purist? Yeah, he was. He was talking about George R. R. Martin and the books, and he gave the show the blame for everything regarding the books, for the miserable state that the books are in. The show is to blame. Martin's inability to finish the books, and the show is to blame. The show is everything to blame. At least Preston is honest and sincere enough to admit and acknowledge it's not the show's fault.
It's producers and everything for it. It's sort of like, let's say a really, really good person, and then somebody happens to give them $1 million, and then they take that $1 million and they become a drug addict and kill themselves, right? Like, is the person that gave the $1 million to them to blame?
No.
No. It's just that person didn't know how to handle $1 million. Well, George R. R. Martin doesn't know how to handle fame and massive wealth and all of these things. He doesn't know how to handle it, and it's destroyed him as a writer. And I don't mean it's destroyed his abilities, because I think his abilities are still there. It's destroyed him as a writer in the sense that he's not producing anything.
Hey, look, man. The guy, if anything, he hasn't really put out any books besides Fire and Blood. But even then, it seems like most of what's happening is Hollywood and everybody else is
Yeah.
paying him to put his name on other products so those products can sell. He's becoming the DJ Khaled of the writers' world.
Here's the irony. I'm gonna find, this might be the clip that you're gonna pull out for previews. Okay. George R. R. Martin, his life has proved the message of his own work. That power corrupts.
Oh, stop it. Maybe a tad.
Maybe a tad.
Like I said in the previous video where we discussed this, I can't blame him. I really can't, because
and that's
everybody
the thing,
wants that.
If we were in the same situation, would we be able to resist? Would we be able to be on that deadline?
Would you resist? Yes, you would, because you have a wife and a child.
Yeah.
I would drown in the coke and the hookers. I would go down in the blaze of glory.
You'd be finding Santa Fe's finest, or what?
Preston, you are a stand-up. You're a stand-up guy, a morally good conscience. Me, no, I'm out of my mind. And you know this very well.
Maybe, yeah. Okay. I know our video is going really long, but I would say that the difference, I would say that I would not be actually so negative about you, because you're a very social person, and you are tapped into and care about like what other people around you, the community, says. And so I think like you would hear these messages, like say Carmine produced the greatest fantasy series ever. You would come to me and you'd be like, fuck, all these motherfuckers are saying I'm not finishing this goddamn book. I better finish this fucking book just to show those motherfuckers. Like, that's how you would handle it. Like, knowing you.
You know me well. Holy shit.
You'd be so angry
that
people were talking shit about you.
Yeah.
That you would finish the book to spite those motherfuckers.
Yeah, he's right. I'm a very petty asshole. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. I am.
All right. Continue.
So, number one, this is something we've complained about several times, and everybody else has complained about several times as well, and it has almost nothing to do with the show, but what the show has become in the zeitgeist of like cultural importance or whatever. Number one, the series arguably did more harm than good to the fantasy genre. By no fault of its own, Game of Thrones kickstarted an edgy trend that's still being chased today in shows like Vikings and The Witcher. But its failure inflicted worse damage. When it crashed and burned, interest in and respect for fantasy plummeted. Viewers.
That's why House of the Dragons premiere episode became the biggest premiere episode in HBO history.
Weren't ready to give another medieval epic a shot in fear of reliving Westeros' disappointment. Cases in point, The Wheel of Time launched under the radar, and Game of Thrones' legacy is one of the many reasons behind the doubt Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power is facing. Revisiting HBO's dark fantasy today only makes its negative ramifications genre more pronounced, blah blah. So
now Game of Thrones is also to blame that those other fantasy shows are bad? Like what?
The thing. We've complained about this before as well, where every fucking network that comes out with anything fantasy, you know for a fact that they want to be the next Game of Thrones. There's a power vacuum.
Yes, and you can't blame Game of Thrones for that people are uncreative and have no vision and just try to recreate the ninth wonder of the world that was Game of Thrones.
Was left in Thrones' finale, and there is some truth to that. I don't know if Bill Maher has this thing he loves to say where he goes, I don't know if for a fact, but I know it's true. And I'm going to echo that. I don't know for a fact, but I know it's true that in the writer's room for The Witcher and Wheel of Time, these assholes were trying to plot on how to be the next Game of Thrones and what to do to make it a reality. So, yes, I agree with number one, that Game of Thrones kind of did harm to, like, many fantasy shows now and in the future. Because everybody wants to top Thrones' legacy.
And no one has accomplished it thus far 7 years after the ending, except Game of Thrones' own successor shows with House of the Dragon and The Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
All of this is very true, but how can this is the case with all success? Like, all success is you're gonna have people trying to mimic it and mimic it badly and take advantage of it. It's like those straight to video sequels that come out after a disaster movie comes out. It's like, after Armageddon comes out, you're going to have some sort of straight to video thing called Meteor, it's just like a horrible movie that's just trying to capitalize on the success of something big. So I mean, you're always just going to have that crap that tries to mimic it. Now, is it bad for fantasy? No, I don't think it's bad for fantasy at all. If anything, more people are now interested in fantasy. People are going to be producing more fantasy, and anytime you just have more people reading and more people producing, you're going to get a lot more crap, but you're also going to get a lot more really great hits. So that's just going to be the case. There's going to be some really great fantasy out there. There's going to be, all of these people are going to be into writing, and they're going to start producing similar things, and they're not going to be in the same sort of CW vein of fantasy. That we're gonna have some really interesting stuff in the future. So
here's where I disagree. I think fans of the Wheel of Time and fans of The Witcher would disagree with you. Specifically, Wheel of Time. I have this one guy on my Discord. He was telling me, because he's read the Wheel of Time books eons ago, and he was telling me how the Wheel of Time does have politics in it, but in later on books. The first few books does have it, but not as much as the show did.
Yeah, Wheel of Time is weird because, like I say, the Wheel of Time transitions the high fantasy time period from going from Lord of the Rings to Song of Ice and Fire. It's half classic high fantasy, half gritty high fantasy.
Right. But I think the problem that I'm starting to see now, especially with Wheel of Time, especially with Witcher and Halo and Cowboy Bebop and a lot of these other shows, is that the way Game of Thrones influenced these other shows, and not for the better, was that here you have Dave and Dan, two virtual unknowns who came in. Yeah, they adapted it, but they also injected their own stuff in there too. Now you have all these
since the very first episode of the series.
They're fucking writers who they can't get their own show from networks, but instead they borrow other franchises and adapt those and try to inject their own bullshit in there to try to be the next either Dave and Dan and try to make their show the next Game of Thrones so they can be kind of like Dave and Dan from the earlier couple of seasons. Right? Like, for example, the Halo shit. It's not following the games. The writers are doing their own fucking thing.
Oh, my. Okay.
And same with Cowboy Bebop and The Witcher as well to some extent. Like, those showrunners and the writers kind of doing their own thing. And
Wheel of Time didn't have that much injected. It was more about what was cut. But but people, reception of Wheel of Time has been kind of, it was pretty good. It wasn't great. It was okay. That's kind of the reception. Like, no one says that Wheel of Time was bad, but no one says Wheel of Time was like the best thing.
It was just whatever, just mediocre.
I would say that they would say it was, from what I've heard, some people say it's mediocre, some people say slightly better than mediocre. But nobody is a huge hater, and no one is a huge lover of the Wheel of Time series. I watched it. I would agree with that. I would say, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, but I would never say it's like must see. Game of Thrones. Like, I'm just like, oh, Mom, you need to watch this, and my mom loved it. I would never say, Mom, you've got to watch Wheel of Time. That's the thing, right? Are you gonna recommend it? When I say to people when I say Carmine, have you watched Russian Doll?
It's on my list.
Oh my god, it's so fucking good. Season 2's coming out. Oh man, Russian Doll.
That's why I said that. Yeah,
Russian
Doll. On my list.
Russian Doll is so fucking good, always recommend it, you know. But or The Leftovers. I'd always say like, no, The Leftovers is fucking incredible. But am I gonna say like, oh, you must see Wheel of Time? Yeah, you know, it's fine.
Say what you will about Dave and Dan. They did, even though they adapted Game of Thrones from the books fairly well, they also made it their own. And like sure, like these showrunners for like The Witcher and Halo and all that stuff, they want to make a name for themselves. And they had an idea for their own show, but they weren't given like carte blanche to make that show on those networks. And now they're living out their own ideas with borrowed characters from other franchises. And
the fact that people can say like, oh, they're trying to make the show look like Game of Thrones is actually a big compliment to D&D. Like they did create a visual signature on screen that was unique that other people are trying to mimic, you know.
So. Well, this is what I'm saying. Like Game of Thrones, in a sense, is because this guy is saying that people aren't giving new medieval shows a shot. I think that's bullshit. I think people are more willing to give newer medieval shows a shot because fans are looking for the next Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
The problem is that showrunners and writers are trying to not only mimic Game of Thrones, but they're doing it very poorly. That's the problem I'm having, is that ultimately, stop trying to be Game of Thrones. Be whatever show you're trying to make. Don't copy Thrones. Don't try to do what they did. Don't try to, mimic Dave and Dan. Just do what you
Agreed.
need to do to write and tell a good story, the best of your ability. That's it. You don't need to copy. Wheel of Time, just be Wheel of Time. Don't be Thrones with, like, magic and shit. Witcher, don't be Thrones with, like, monsters and Geralt and sorcerers and shit. Just be Witcher. But they're not going to do that because they want to. When networks and showrunners and writers want to mimic Game of Thrones, I don't think they want to mimic the story and the story beats. I think they want to mimic the success. Because say what you will about the final season, that final season was abysmal in ratings, but the viewership
No, it wasn't either. The Long Night episode on IMDb has over 100,000 10 out of 10 ratings.
3 million viewers an episode for the last season. That's like a Super Bowl every week.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Is they think that it's like an equation. That if I mimic 4 and I mimic plus and I mimic 6, I'm gonna get the result of 10, right? And so that's what they're doing. They're putting inputs in and thinking that because they want that input out. They want the huge success. So they're like, well, what were the inputs into Game of Thrones? And they're like, well, okay, it was a fantasy story, and it was an established book series.
This is the writer's room right here, boys. Yeah. This is the writer's room. It
was an established book series that fantasy fans really loved. Okay, and then it was really dark, and there were some tits and dragons, and
quick, write that down. Yeah. Tits dragons.
So it's dark, established book series that fantasy fans love, and then if we can do that, then it's going to be massive success. Well, but like you said before, it's the lightning in a bottle. Like there's that unnamed, unique element that we can't explain that makes.
I can explain. Game of Thrones is the best story in the world, and that's why it became the most popular and biggest drama show or series in the world as well.
Something come together and be special, I don't know how, we don't know how to create that. So
I feel so bad for Lord of the Rings. I hope to God they try to mimic the success of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings instead of this bullshit.
People are right now. The expectations are so low. All I see is stuff trashing Lord of the Rings, and so.
Well, no, you're going to see people trashing Lord of the Rings from the usual suspects, and they're trashing it for all the wrong reasons.
Right.
Like there was a guy who was trashing the trailer for Miss Marvel, and bro, even I have like the cadence to know that like Miss Marvel was not made for me. Like Miss Marvel was not made. Like the only thing I had, because you said this, you're like, we should cover Miss Marvel. You have so much in common with her. You're both immigrants and from Jersey. Yeah, Preston, that's where it ends. I have nothing else to cover. This show clearly wasn't made for me, and that's fine. Like just because it wasn't made for me doesn't mean I'm gonna like rip it apart. But these assholes are just ripping it apart.
I mean, it's true that like Bridgerton isn't made for me, but clearly it's made for somebody, and it's a huge fucking success. You know,
right?
Like, it's tapped into something. In fact, I would say like right now, Bridgerton is the closest to Game of Thrones.
Oh,
that's out. No. I'm being completely serious, right? It's an established book series, right? There's a lot of like politics and intrigue. There's a lot of sex, not much violence. Like it's kind of a must see for so many people. People talk about it. It's in the zeitgeist. Like it's probably the closest thing to Game of Thrones right now, even though it's very, very different from Game of Thrones, right? So, but yeah, if I were gonna like take this, if you're in the SNL writing room and you're like, oh God, we need a pop culture thing to do a skit on. What would you do a skit on? I would choose Bridgerton. Like that's the thing right now.
I'll take your word for it. I haven't seen Bridgerton. I'll take your word. That's the one where like it's the court of like Victoria, England, whatever. I'm butchering it, and they have like Asians.
It's Victorian. It's Victorian England, and it's mostly about men and women, high class men and women, like pairing off and finding husbands and wives for each other in the in this society, this high society, and all of the characters. It happens to be a overly diverse situation relative to actual history.
You told me about this. You told me about this a while ago, where you're like, no, the English court here did not have like Asians and
which is fine. It doesn't. It's a TV show. I don't care. But like it's interesting. But whatever they've done. And like I say, it's kind of lightning in a bottle. Like whatever they've done, it's working. It's working because people are watching and people are talking. And I've seen bits and pieces of Bridgerton season 1 and season 2 just over the shoulder of my wife, and it's put the acting's fine. It's put together really well. So I can't. That's you put all those things together, like a compelling story with good acting and characters and everything. It's it's not dark. It's not Game of Thrones, and yet it's succeeded in capturing that sort of place in society.
There you go.
Bridgerton.
Yeah, no, that's all I have here for this article. Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't, but
So I think we can make a stop right here because I don't have much else to say about it. And again, it's another video where season 8 haters are talking about a rewatch of the show. Or in this case, they are talking about they are commenting on an article who claims to have rewatched Game of Thrones, but it's not coming to any conclusions or change in opinion that you would expect from a proper rewatch that did something on you and had an effect on you. No, it's again, there's no self-reflection, there's no humbleness, no openness, no admits, and no admissions to mistakes that were made along the way by the viewer. No. Nothing of that sort. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.